to a Shamanic Experience. I'm Katie Weatherup, shamanic practitioner and solo traveler. If you believe mountains hold ancient wisdom and rivers cleanse, you're in the right place. Let's explore the energy and magic of places near and far, and I'll share practical travel tips along the way, one sacred location at a time. One of my most persistent back burner passion projects has been sharing about sacred travel. And it's been over 20 years since I published a very short book about sacred travel, practical shamanism for your vacations and vision quests. And I had this idea of a series at that time of a shamanic experience in different destinations. And at the time I was writing books, so I thought there could be a book that was a shamanic experience in Peru, a shamanic experience in the UK, a shamanic experience in Iceland. As I was going to all these really sacred and powerful places on the planet and feeling the energy and running around to deserted places and having amazing conversations with the land spirits and the energies and how they moved and shaped the experience. I came down to San Diego for college and stayed after that, and for coming up on a decade, I've been living about 30 miles east of downtown, which takes you into the hills of San Diego outside the city. So it's kind of the best of both country and urban living experiences. But my reasons for San Diego working really well for me as a place to live have a lot of things to do with the community, the people that I'm connected to, and the convenience of the weather and the ease of life, the whole network of things that I've established. And I regularly think about where I might live if I didn't live here and haven't really come up with an answer. But the reasons for San Diego don't have to do with being completely in love with the energy here. And I know people who are. I know people for whom the ley lines and the energetics are just so nourishing and so the perfect, most optimal thing. But for me, it's a pleasant relationship. I can get my roots into the ground. I feel supported and nourished. I get along with the land guardians well. But there isn't this epic love affair with the energy like I have in some of the places I travel. But let's face it, the middle of Death Valley is not a good place to try to live day in and day out. For one thing, there's no solid internet connection, so it'd be very, very difficult to do my work. And the temperature extremes are really quite something. So I live in a place that's very beautiful and very conducive and very aligned. I tell people that the home that I have now is the best Katie habitat that I've ever lived in. And it's a sweet little house, and I have my hot tub and really beautiful views out of very large windows and a fairly short drive to Trader Joe's or the grocery store. So there's a lot to be said for this, but at the same time, there's this profound, passionate, deep love of travel. And I've been exploring for over 20 years what it would look like to share some of what that experience is for me. I absolutely adore the YouTube vloggers who travel and record video as they go and tell the story of their travels, but I found as a medium I don't get along with video very well. So when it comes to my podcast, when I'm describing a shamanic experience somewhere, feel free to create your own multimedia experience. You could pull up a YouTube video with beautiful drone footage of somewhere that I'm traveling and just play it on mute while I blather on about where I am, or pull up image searches in Google that will show you some of these really magnificent places, because I think that they're really wonderful to see. And depending on how far I get and how much engagement there is, I may create a separate website for my practice to show some of the beautiful images and pictures. So stay tuned. I'll have in the show notes updates about, how you could get lists of tips like Airbnbs I love or places that I went to specifically. It's nicer to write things down than to mispronounce names that I've only read, or to see some of my particular travel photos. I'm studying a little bit of iPhone photography with the goal of achieving mediocrity, not exceptional photography skills. I just don't have the passion or the interest for that. But, if most of my pictures are kind of well framed and I haven't put my finger over the lens, we'll call it good. But what I do feel like I can uniquely speak to is people who are traveling for the richness of the energetics. And it's interesting to me because travel is something that a lot of humans are really passionate about. It's something that we're really magnetized to, that we really love. In fact, if you look at happiness research, a lot of the fancy car, the fancy house we feel like would make us happy, but when people attain those things, they find that there's what they call hedonistic adaptation, where they get used to this thing and then it doesn't continue to make them happy. But the research shows that people who invest their resources in experiences like travel tend to find a really great correlation in terms of how happy they thought it would make them and how happy, they actually are. And of course, sometimes we miscalculate and circumstances make trips difficult, but there's a lot of sort of universal richness to going places and experiencing these kind of things. And these can be with people who don't really have a sense of the spiritual, or some people would probably say that they're spiritual but not religious, and the beauty of what you can see in nature is the divine represented for them, because that can show up as well. But for me, there's a really specific ability to sense energy. So I could be looking at an absolutely gorgeous vista and then close my eyes because I don't want to be distracted by the beautiful thing after I've stared at it for a while from the energetics. And this affinity for being able to feel the energy as an additional sense. So when we start talking about psychic ability, there's a lot of complexity about what's projection and how reliable that sense is and those kind of things. But for me, it's as vivid and sometimes more vivid a sense than what I'm seeing and hearing and smelling. There's just this additional sense that is very stimulated by travel and these kind of experiences. And there are all these different flavors of what it is to be certain places on the planet and on certain ley lines. So the experience of being in an old standing stone circle in Ireland or the UK, and even those all have different flavors, it's going to look really different than the West Fjords of Iceland, or really different than the Yukon or Death Valley or Peru. I've just experienced a very distinctive flavor, and I tend to fall very much in love with whatever place I've just been because of the magnificence and the richness of the experience. For me, in a way, it's almost hard to wrap my head around what a travel experience would be without being able to feel the energy. Because sure, it's lovely to see pretty things and, have experiences. And, as I said, a lot of the population gets a lot out of that. But for me, there's this incredible experience of going to an old growth forest and having a particular tree that just vibrates with this massive torch-like energy. I remember one where I was, tromping merrily along the path, and it was like crossing a threshold when I got within a certain range, and there was no line of sight. I couldn't see how close I was to the tree, but the whole vibration of the forest changed in this really definitive moment as I stepped closer to this tree that was around at the time of the birth of Christ. It was pretty remarkable. And one of the things that I really love doing is going on solo travel. And part of what I love about solo travel is if I like anyone enough to go on a trip with them, I tend to be very attuned to them and engaged with them. And one of the sort of hazards and challenges of having the archetype of a healer combined with a lot of psychic ability is you have to provide yourself with a lot of adult supervision to avoid codependency or caretaking or overgiving, the kind of flip side of that coin, because there's just a tremendous empathy and tremendous awareness of the experience that other people are having. And in being attuned to that, I can miss some of the richness of the earth beneath me and the animals that are moving through, and these kind of experiences. So when I do solo travel, especially to a place I'm unfamiliar with, all of those parts of our brain that create shortcuts because it would require less calories. There's a cognitive bias. I don't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but it's about how if someone tells you a shortcut, a driving shortcut to somewhere you go all the time, and you try it, you can come up saying like, wow, that took so much longer. That's not a shortcut at all. But when you look at the actual number of minutes, it actually was shorter. It's just that being in an unfamiliar route, you're paying attention, what's the flow of traffic? What are the things here? As humans, part of our brain is always scanning for threats and opportunities. But when we're really familiar with places, our brains can go into the habitual and the power saver mode. So for me, there's a really vibrant awakeness of moving about the world where I don't know what the roads are and the restaurants and the, experiences. And I really like the aliveness that comes with that. I think it's a really neat state of being. And when I travel somewhere, I just tend to end up with places that have some really deep energetic medicine and magic for me. And I don't necessarily keep current with this concept of a mesa. So these are like these medicine bundles where people will gather stones from different power places. And when I was younger, it tended to be very important to me to bring a stone back or multiple stones from anywhere that I traveled. As I've gotten older, I feel like I don't need that to tap in, but there's this energetic relationship to the guardians of the land and the beings and their different forms of support that I can call on when I'm working on behalf of my clients. When I get myself into a real pickle, like, it's a powerful thing to, sit in my hot tub and energetically connect in with some of the guardians in and around Death Valley for healing and shifting really stagnant energy. And so there's this collection of relationships that end up being really meaningful to me in a way that doesn't always make sense to other people or quite go into words. And so I've just had this idea of creating something where I had a chance to share some of the richness of those experiences as I go through them. So the vision for the series has always been to call it a shamanic experience in, and the in place changes based on where I traveled. It could be Peru, it could be the Yukon, as I said, Hawaii, all of these wonderful places that I've been. But I just want to break that down a little bit because I think the a shamanic experience part of it is really important because it's only an experience. If you talk to the First Nations or the Indigenous people, they're going to have a really rich and different vision of the magic and medicine and power and rhythms that the land holds. And likewise, if you talk to another shamanic practitioner who went to the same land and had some kind of really rich experience, they're going to probably report different things. One of the tricks I really like is being able to attune and drop in at the layer that is right for the experience. And there are many, many, many layers with land. And years ago when I went to Ireland, someone was talking about like, oh, I had such a hard time because of all the violence and the potato famine and the oppression and the conflict. And my experience of bebopping around Ireland was really magical with the sun and the clouds and the rainbows and these sacred wells and these places of power and these old trees. And, there's just so much richness. Incidentally, I don't much care for castles that have roofs on them. They did not feel like happy places. So if I'm going to go hang at a castle, I'm going to be a lot more happy with the energy if it's a castle that doesn't have a roof on, if it's a ruin that's been open to the elements. But what was interesting to me about this was I really worked with the guides knowing that I didn't want to go spend my precious 10 days in Ireland trying to work with the complexities of hundreds of years of oppression and suffering and conflict. So I just dropped into the layer of the ley lines of the land and the fairy magic and this, really wonderful, potent, beautiful magic of the land and just the beauty of the scenery, the contemporary fields that are an astonishing shade of green and those kind of experiences. And so I think it's worth noting that when you travel, there are many, many layers, and these layers are going to have different flavors and experiences. And it's nice to be sort of conscious about the one that you want to hang with. That being said, one of the things I adore about going to Iceland is it's one of the few places on the planet that doesn't have a narrative of the indigenous people being displaced for colonizers or new settlers to come in. They did have colonial times that were really hard, but there's a continuity of, as far as we know, once people settled, they tended to have this through line of experience that they had. And I think that's definitely a cool thing when you don't have to kind of navigate these layers of complexity. I like places that feel really clean and spacious. And it's also really nice if I can have a place where there aren't a lot of humans, because humans are really loud. I do a lot of tracking what humans are up to and what their experience is, in the nature of my shamanic healing practice. So when I have that blissfulness of getting to be attentive to other layers and other rhythms, there's a real joy and bliss in that. So long way around of saying that I'm really attuned to this idea that what I'm sharing when I talk about a shamanic experience somewhere is just a shamanic experience, one of many that someone could completely have a different flavor or experience or really not get a lot out of something. I visited Rosslyn Chapel in the UK. I think I'm saying that right. It was out of the Dan Brown book made it very, very popular. And it was a really interesting place with some really wacky energy and all these little like nature faces carved in. And I could tell that this was a really potent place of power. There were some really powerful ley lines, and they just weren't my flavor. They weren't bad. There was nothing negative about the energy. There was nothing, unpleasant. I think lots of people have gone there and just been, blown away by, the deliciousness from their point of view. And for me, I was like, well, I recognize the power. There's nothing bad about it. It just doesn't have anything to offer. We're not going to be friends. This is not going to be a place that I journey to for help or healing for myself or my clients. Whereas, I get somewhere in Glastonbury and those ley lines are ones that I have huge affinity for. They're very nourishing. They're very powerful. So just want to leave it open for the difference in experiences and stay tuned, pay attention to the notes and such, because I'll update as I go. This is a side passion project. I don't think it's going to end up monetized. Who knows? But it would have to become wildly popular, and I'm not, that committed to promoting my work beyond the right livelihood, which my main practice is rocking and rolling at right now. So I don't quite know where this is going to go, but I'm really excited to use the form of the spoken word to illuminate some of these things and to just really invite you to use the internet. Again, play beautiful footage of a place on mute while I talk about it if you want something that's visual, because while I'm aspiring to solid mediocrity in terms of my photography skills, I'm really not with video skills. I can't even hold the camera level, and I'm not inclined to tote along a gimbal to try to level out the footage. So I tried to fly a drone once. It ended up on the neighbor's roof. The drone was eventually recovered, but after that it went into a drawer, so I didn't destroy it. And so knowing this about myself, I'm going to invite you to enjoy other people's efforts. And I hope that there's something that inspires or illuminates or helps you to tune into something that might be really subtle in your experience, or get a feel for what I look for. Because when we travel, there's so many different choices of, this road or that road or left or right, or what we can get up to, how much time we spend and where we go and all of those kind of things. So I hope that I can illuminate something that allows you to have a richer, deeper experience of travel, or just have a vicarious experience and sort of tap into the energy in a deeper way with somewhere that either you're not that called to or isn't attainable to go. And again, I love those people who do the YouTube travel channels. I think it's such a neat thing that they're creating. And sometimes I get really inspired, like, "Ooh, I really want to go to that place." And other times I'm like, "I do not ever want to go to that place. That the what you would have to work with to make that trip happen just doesn't really speak to me, doesn't appeal." So I totally want to follow along with you while you have this experience, because it's really interesting to witness. So for places that you do want to go and places that you don't want to go, I hope that I'm able to offer some value for you and help you to deepen in with a sacred connection to the land. Thank you so much for joining me. To learn more about me and my work, please visit my website at handsoverheart.com. There you can join my mailing list for access to free bonus content in the members-only area. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It would help me out a lot. If you'd like to receive personal shamanic support from me and my team of guides, please consider joining my Patreon community. You'll find the link below. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Katie Weatherup, wishing you wholeness and happiness.